mean, I made the jump from colored as having always been colored, not knowing anything else but colored, coming from the most mixed family on earth. And we all sitting there and fighting about weddings and everything, but not knowing anything else but being a colored person, and now being a black person, Maverick, but being a Khoisan. So how did that, because you talk about it, but it almost seems seamless, and I understand that I'm sure it's not, or it wasn't, but...
I think, part of it, your question is very good. Part of it was in retrospect. So when I was writing the book and ordering my life and my thinking and feeling into these different chapters, I suddenly realized that there's been a theme of identity running throughout all of the stories that I was writing. And it's something that has been important. It's important for all of us. And it's something that I've been grappling with since a kid. Of this belongingness, especially if you grow up as a dark-skinned kid in a colored neighborhood in the Western Cape, And my mother was highly ambitious, so we always had to go and live with the Lani colors. We had to go and live in Steerhalf and speak English. So those issues of identity, I suddenly saw how it was threaded through my life. So it was quite easy to see that there were these clear political periods in South Africa where this thing called colored wasn't there in the 50s. There was just people were not colored, and then suddenly this colored thing came, and that's apartheid. So, and we absorbed it. And how did we absorb it? It became part of who we are, right? But is this a good thing? And that's when I started to question that, when BC came along, because the stuff that even before Steve Biko that we'd been reading about as young kids, the Du Bois books that I read, that speaks to a time before BC but is exactly written from the same perspective. Reading Marcus Garvey and those things, and you suddenly realize, no, we have a common experience as black people across the world, which somehow I have to deal with this thing called colored. And so to become a black person, I have to also understand other black people in a certain way. What are the common strivings, what are the common experiences of being human beings on a planet dominated by certain groups and certain material values. And so that up to that point, things were quite clear for me when I was writing the book. The last part of the book was quite difficult because all around me, I suddenly realized there was this resurgence, return to traditional values, people looking for themselves in the past of South Africa. And I didn't quite understand how important that was, even when I was writing the book, when I started writing it. But through performing rituals, through going deeper into my spiritual self, through beginning to understand that this spiritual tradition that I come from is the mother of all spiritual traditions. And it didn't start yesterday. It goes back tens of thousands of hundreds of thousands of years. And African belief systems, the belief system that I come from, predates any of this Christianity that we celebrate so easily. And for me, when I started opening myself up and practicing certain things and creating certain rituals to reconnect with my ancestors, I felt it's like, why would I drive a Toyota when I've got a Ferrari? I mean, really, what is the point of practicing a Christian spiritual tradition when it's so new and so inadequate and quite primitive in places, where what Africans had traditionally and originally is huge and rich and very threatening. Because first of all, it gives you immense power, not just spiritual power, but immense power in the material world. And when you have grown enough to know how to handle that power, there's nothing that you can't do. And so the colonials were very, very smart. They understood that first you have to take away that kind of religion and replace it with something where they have to go to a mediator. You have to have a priest, you have to have a church, you have to have an institution. We had incredible, powerful relationships directly with the divine. And these relationships, we could be ordered and governed with the assistance of our ancestors. And those belief systems are quite simple, but they are essentially very powerful. So for me, it hasn't been really that difficult uncovering these things because it sits there at the heart of all of us. The reason why a lot of us are so shit scared about dabbling in spirits, like my sister says, is because it is a powerful part of who we are, and it's a powerful part that we suppress because, yeah, for the reasons that we all know.
But Sylvia, I think that, sorry guys, just to go back into that, as colored people, I feel that that's where we've got, there is this gap that is missing there, because you find that the majority of colored people don't even want to admit their greasiness. They're not even black conscious. They don't even admit that they're black people. So how do you even get to the fact that you have got, yes, how do you even get to the fact that you are Khoisan or anything like that? So I feel that is why, because you talk about this greatness that is in us, and we've always spoke about this apathy and this lethargy amongst colored people, and I imagine that at some point you've got to shirk this colored identity, and it's always going to be there until we take ownership of something. And
but just to answer that very quickly, when I was a kid at this one primary school that I went to many primary schools, but the one primary school that I went to was opposite a white school. And in 1961, when I was in grade 3, studied 1 at the time, one day these kids all came out waving a little flag and carrying a medal with the new money or something, and apparently that was the First Republic Day or whatever. And so the older kids convinced us that we've got to beat them up, take the medals and the flags, and so we did. And then afterwards it became a sport. So we used to just beat up the white kids as a matter of course. In the afternoons. It was like fun. And so later on when I reached South Peninsula High School, and we had school boycotts for the first time in South Africa in the 60s, and people forget that before 76 there were school boycotts, and there was Arcadia High, and there were boycotts in support of teachers who'd been suspended and were teaching politics and stuff. And so I used to be part of this gang of kids on the station, beating up the kids who were trying to go to school and so on and so on. But so for a large part of my life, my activism was hitting people over the head to help them understand this is wrong, you've got to come right. And then, this journey over this last while has been a very powerful understanding of, no, I don't have to do anything. All I've got to do is be the most powerful, best person that I can be. And the way that I can do that is to live in complete harmony with what the spiritual and divine dictates are for my life. If I think I've got a plan, forget it. There's another plan, so go with that other plan. And then everything around you comes right. And I think where we are now is that there are some incredible leaders, there are some great activists doing incredible things, people teaching the Khoikhoi language. It's just been allowed back in the schools in the Northern Cape. So there are things moving towards a more normal, equitable situation. So I don't think I really have to worry about people who still want to be French.
Yeah. So it's Days, and then Zanele, Snowy, and Terry. Teddy, sorry.
Thanks. For me, Sylvia, reading the book, I had to pause at some point. I couldn't read the book in one setting because I think the emotions that it brought upon me. You speak about certain aspects of sexuality. You actually called it themes. The sexuality, sexual abuse, issues of economics, politics, issues also of inequality, the gender aspects. And those things, if we reflect on as where we come from as Africans, it was extremely emotional for me. There were some parts in the book, myself and Dwayne, we were reading it at the same time, where I would say to him, this thing reminded me of what happened to me at some point in my life. At a young age, I was sexually abused as well. So I had to pause and let go of some things. I grew up in District 6 in Cape Town. And growing up there, I come from a mixed home, so I could relate to some of the dynamics that happens within a social setting, within the economics around you, within the politics around you. So I just wanted to ask, how did you place yourself writing the book?
That's a good question, because as a journalist, which is what I primarily am, before I started this whole writing thing and became even more poverty-stricken, your world has to be orderly. There's a deadline. There's a lot of demands. You have to be 100% correct. There's court cases that can happen. There's, the pressures are immense. So you have to be so organized. So when I started writing this book, I had this idea that, okay, maybe it's a book about Kaba, or maybe it's a book about myself, I don't know. But I had a very orderly idea, and all of those orderly chapters ended up on the floor. I mean, they just didn't make it into the book. And then I realized there were some very disorderly things happening. At one stage, I had this flip chart in my house, and I'd wake up and I'd have these dreams, and I'd sort of write things and make drawings, and I had all these post-it notes, and they were stuck all over the show, and all that stuff, all those post-it notes and the random drawings and things on the flip chart, those made it into the book. So it was an extremely chaotic experience, because I think when we have learned to respect too much the rational mind and our intellectual selves, which is such a tiny part of who we are, then we have to be clapped right a bit, So I was very proud of what an organized journalist I am, and I'm so together, and so the way this book kind of happened when I really started writing was very disorderly. I'd wake up at 4 o'clock in the morning, and I'd have these like stomach cramps, and then I can't get back to sleep, and then I'd start writing, or I'd light a candle and I'd do pashla and speak to my ancestors, and then stuff would come, and then I just write it down. And there's some times when I read the book still, and I have to go through it sometimes to do some readings, and there are parts that almost still catch me by surprise. You think, did I really write that? Because the way these things come to you is just, first of all, chaotic, and it's not from the place in your logical mind, and it's not from the place in your intellectual mind. And so the difficult parts were somehow, the difficult parts were not so much the life experiences, like the sexual abuse, like the drinking poison and trying to commit suicide. Those were not the difficult parts. The really difficult parts were when I had to be pulled, literally kicking and screaming, into looking at this physical world from another place, and respecting my intuition more, and respecting my intellect less, and trusting that those voices that I hear and that stuff that comes and that ends up on the post-it notes and the flip charts, that's writing, not that other nonsense that looks so pretty.
Thank you. Zanele?
Thank you very much, Dad. Silva, thank you very much for this book. I'm a healer. So, like Des, when I read the first chapter, I had to pause. Excuse me, especially when you are going through the ritual where you had to do the Ukfem. I really had to pause, and somehow it resonated with my journey as well. Because at some point in my life, I was sick as well. But the doctor couldn't tell what was wrong with me. And maybe like you, because also I was a political science student, being at university, and I'm thinking, but on my side, maybe because I was surrounded by healers, because I was relating to people like Dr. Wadisubut, who used to help me understand even Claude, the Claude that you related to in there. I had my own as well. And like you, I think I grew up very strange. Like I was a tomboy, but not really a tomboy. I was a loner, but not really a loner. Even up until now, I think I'm a very strange people to other people. But I think the book, in a way, I went through Twasa myself, through the post. And then the question that I have for you is a very personal question. my question is, do you think